Hello, and welcome to the Education Zone, the podcast that's all about the best practices in learning and teaching. I'm your host, Ali Reza Tahmasabi, and today we are going to talk about student-centered learning with John Fagan. John is a career educator for the Faculty of Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Victoria. In our discussion today, we talk about student-centered learning in post-secondary education, using electronic portfolios to practice reflective learning, and a little bit about the characteristics of 21st century education. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe to the Education Zone podcast on YouTube. Hey John, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me about the student-centered learning. I want to kind of start the discussion by asking you what student learning is and what your definition of it is.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, nice to chat to you. Student-centered learning is definitely something that we're hearing more and more these days, and we're seeing a shift in education. Student-centered learning itself can involve many different things around a student's learning experience as they go through their education. But for the educators, it could also include instructional approaches, how they're setting up assignments. Flipped classroom is another approach where you get the student to do the homework before they come to class and then have that discussion. I think also with the advent of more distant learning and online and everything else, students are being forced to take more responsibility for their own learning. So it's this idea of understanding the learning process as an individual, not just going through the assignments and checking the boxes. I think is a good way to start looking at it.
Right. And from my experience of, researching about student-centered learning, I see that it's more common in K-12 education, elementary, middle school, or high school. And it's not so common probably in post-secondary education or university or colleges. Why do you think that is, especially maybe like concept of even flipped classrooms? I see it more in middle schools or elementary schools. Do you think is there a reason for that? Or?
Yeah, I'm not sure in other areas, but in British Columbia, there was a big move a number of years ago to shift the K to 12 system into new competencies around thinking. So we talk about collaboration, communication, critical thinking, these areas that are now the skills that'll help us to get to where we're going, not just knowing the facts that we used to know, because we can access everything on the internet now. It's more now knowing how to search, knowing, to use Boolean characters in your search so that you're going to get what you're looking for, to use inverted commas around something, so whatever you're looking for. I think the reason, may be that in the K to 12, it's a more contained system, that there's standardization across the province, whereas universities and colleges are often doing things the way they want to do things. I think what we'll see, though, is the real shift when those students who are now in grade 10, 11, 12 are coming into universities and are actually starting to look for this sort of approach where it's a student-centered rather than a educator-centered approach. So that's going to, I think, force post-secondary institutions to think about this a little bit more and to start embracing more student-centered approaches. Having said that, Ali, there are a lot of educators in post-secondary, here at UVic as well at Camosun, that are using student-centered approaches already.
Right. Yeah. Especially, I know it's definitely hard to do in large classrooms, as you say, and especially when we get to post-secondary education, there's maybe more focus, there's more individualized learning going on, so it's definitely hard to make it more student-centered. But so how do we go about making a class student-centered? Were we talking about either in a face-to-face environment or in an online environment where we are right now since last year? What do you think are the best strategies to make a classroom student-centered?
Yeah, I think the way to start with answering that one, Ali, would be to see that we've sort of really made the shift into proficiency-based learning, or what we call competencies. That when you're, it makes things more measurable. So when we're looking at a course and we're talking about learning outcomes, we say after finishing this course, the student should be able to, and that statement that rolls out of that is the learning outcome, but it's also a competency statement. They'll be able to do this, this, and this, which is a competency they can take out into life and into the workplace. So by doing that, what we're doing is we're actually personalizing things a bit more. And I think it's that challenge of how do we make the learning a more personal journey. And this is where platforms like PebblePad and using ePortfolios as a way for a student to do longitudinal reflection, not just, oh, for this assignment, what does it mean to me, and write a statement, but to go back and forth and to build. It's almost the building of their own professional identity. And I think, to answer your question directly after a roundabout approach there, I think we're seeing instructors giving students choices where they don't only have to submit a written assignment, they could do it in a video or a sound file, other options as well, so that the student is expressing themselves in a way that is their strength, not being forced to use some, let's say the student's not great at writing, but they're really good at speaking. Well, letting them do their paper in a video format can really make a difference. So that customizing was always really tough because of the numbers of students that we're dealing with. I think in today's world with online and platforms and things like Brightspace and this, we can customize it, and we can get the student to customize their own journey as they plan it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I've seen it more in online classrooms since last year. I've seen more customizable, I guess, options for assignments because I guess in face-to-face classrooms, we usually submit paper assignments, which is really not the best way, because students can show their learning in different ways. And like if someone does a video or maybe an audio version of an assignment instead of a written assignment, they could maybe show their learning in a more substantial way, which is great. And you also touched on e-portfolios, which are, I think, great ways of reflective learning. And also, do you think e-portfolios also help students probably get jobs in the future because of they can show what they've learned in the portfolios?
Yeah, so I think the challenge with e-portfolios is that that term can cover so many things. If you think about your LinkedIn profile, we could call it an e-portfolio. If you look at a resume, that's kind of a portfolio. And this word portfolio comes from, artists will have a portfolio of their work that they've, paintings or whatever. The idea with the e-portfolio actually brings in reflective learning. So with an e-portfolio, it is the platform that facilitates longitudinal reflective learning. So, the student doesn't just put together a portfolio and present it. They're going back and forth and building this knowledge of themselves. In other words, building their professional identity. So from the point of self-knowledge, when you get out to work, yes, they will have a number of we may call them assets, that they've collected along the way, like achievements or certificates or, sometimes digital credentials and digital badging and these kind of things like LinkedIn Learning. Collecting all of these things helps that student, by the time they're finished, to have a better understanding of what their value is. So that in itself now will help them to get a job because they know what their value is, they know which competencies they have strengths in, and they can apply that to a particular job. They will also therefore be better able to put together marketing materials like a resume and a cover letter and a LinkedIn profile because they will be more pointed based on their knowledge of self. It's funny, Ali, I did a philosophy degree many years ago, and I read many different philosophies from different cultures, and I found it interesting to read everything from Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, Ibn Rushd, North African philosophy, the Greek, the traditional Greeks. The common thing I saw was everywhere: know thyself, know yourself. And that's what this is all about, right? We're educating ourselves to get to know ourselves better so we can navigate our way in the world better than we were doing before we knew ourselves, all right? So e-portfolios can be a great tool for that, and using it as a building tool, as a dynamic thing, And yes, the presentational portfolio that comes out at the end, that's the piece that you could then use in a job interview to show examples of your work and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a great for students, because I know sometimes students, when they finish a class, they say, "Oh, I'm free and I don't have to deal with this class anymore." And sometimes they say, "Oh, what have I even learned? I haven't done anything useful." Well, I think the reflective piece is missing there, because if they actually do the reflective process of develop a portfolio of what they've done, what they've learned, then they can actually collect a list of things they've learned, which is, I hope e-portfolios are like used even more, especially, we have the online environment piece. We have Brightspace at UVic we're using right now. I think the e-portfolio piece would be a great addition to classes as well. So where do you think UVic is in terms of student-centered learning from what you've seen from here in the past few years or in the future? Where do you think we should we should go?
Good question. Yeah, I think I think that UVic has historically been a traditional university that wasn't sort of leading edge like a lot of the bigger institutions back east. But we do keep an eye on what's going on out there, and of course, to be clear, these are my opinions, not UVic's opinions. So I don't represent UVic's opinions. But I think what's going on already, just this raised awareness because of COVID, the investment in learning and teaching in a technical realm, the amount of employment we've seen on campus in that area has really brought awareness to this. And there's also a couple of different research programs going on right now looking at these sort of things. So looking at how we use educational portfolios in learning and teaching across campus. So I think with that particular one, we're looking at different platforms. Would it be a good idea to use the facility we have in Brightspace for ePortfolio, or are there other platforms out there that may be more conducive to the learning process? I think UVic, like anyone else, is trying to pivot because of COVID and catch up. I think there's some interesting stuff coming in the next year or so that would definitely open up potential for more platforms that facilitate this reflective work. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the challenge is because, UVic, a lot of classes are the large amount of students, 200, 300 students. So yeah, it's difficult to make a class of that size student-centered. From my experience, classes of, smaller size, where there's maybe even group work, there's discussions between students and the teacher, there's the connection there. So with large classes, how can we go about making large classes student-centered?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I've learned over the years is that we shouldn't be afraid of the chaos or the apparent chaos that can happen in a big class. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Years ago, I used to teach what's now Engineering 130. It used to be Engineering 020. And we had a room of 300 students. And I did a breakout where I got them into 100 groups of 3 and made them do mock interviews with each other. And it was in the Bob Wright lecture theater. So it was just chaos. It was rowdy and noisy, but they all sat in their groups and did their thing. And we checked on this. And the only way we could get their attention was to blow a whistle, like a football referee, and get their attention. But then we engaged in a conversation about what they experienced. And we did with the 3 of them, 5 minutes being interviewed, 5 minutes doing the interviewing, and 5 minutes observing the other 2 people. And we spoke about those perspectives. So the actual exercise itself had some reflection in it. Like one of the roles was observer, the other were participants. And I think, with instructors having the courage to be comfortable with the chaos or the supposed chaos that you feel when there's a breakout in a big class like that. I did have a lot of colleagues say to me, "Oh, you're never going to make that work," and caution me about it. And we did it a number of times and it worked quite well, but it's planning, knowing to use the whistle, little things that can make it usable. And the students seem to enjoy it because it gave them a chance to chat to each other, which, like you say, doesn't usually happen in a large class. Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And
I guess with the help of the online tools we have, I guess we've had that. I mean, Coursespaces, we've had Coursespaces and Brightspace. I guess we could definitely use online tools such as Brightspace, discussion forums,
Breakout
group
rooms,
work.
yeah.
Yeah, get students more involved. I guess give students choice and choice of how they maybe submit their assignments, show their learning, and also a voice, I guess, in the classroom. Because it's easy to get lost in a room of 300 people, and also, people want to be shy. They might not want to, collaborate, but that active collaborative learning is a really important piece for sure. Yeah, I guess so. Do you in your mind, do you think university is built on teacher-centered learning, or is it learner-centered, or where are we
Good
in the
question.
scale of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think given that professors at universities have done the amount of work they've done to be the specialists in their fields, to get a PhD is no small feat. It takes a lot of work and intense work and research work. And if you think about it, what we do at universities is we make knowledge. That's what universities are for, is to create new knowledge and to keep the creation of new knowledge moving forward. And of course, those that are leaders in their fields are at the cutting edge of making that new knowledge. What also happens at universities is that we educate many thousands of students coming through. Some of those students will do an undergrad degree where they're learning foundational abilities in a particular field, whether it be computer science or engineering or whatever. And others of those students are going to go on to become new knowledge creators or professors down the road as well, and go into grad school. So I think the challenge is we're dealing with such a broad range of motivations and goals there that it's hard to please everybody and do everything correct for every group. So it often depends on the instructor or the professor who's in charge, and is their focus more research or more teaching. I think that what we want to think about is that giving the students some option as to how they're learning, and getting students to understand their learning styles. So that students also realize that they're learning concepts and abilities almost like you're picking up tools and filling your toolbox. As they're learning those things, they can use them, yes, in workplace and work-related, career-related things, but also just in life, in navigating a family issue or whatever it is, right? These tools of being able to communicate, or emotional intelligence, or critical thinking, serve us across the board of our life, not just in the workplace. So I think that idea of reflective learning being something that we call praxis, Praxis, or reflection. So it's, in other words, going back and forth. The Greeks had a couple of terms. The term episteme, which is where the word epistemology comes from, actually means learning concepts and knowledge that you can out of a book, sort of thing. Whereas the term techne, which is where the word technology came from, means learning how to do something. And when you combine those two Greek words, episteme and techne, you get praxis, which is practicing your profession, right? So it's not just learning that something is a certain way, but it's learning how to apply that out into the world as well. So that's where reflecting on how that fits into your existing web of knowledge, and then you're able to translate that concept you learn and apply it to a new application somewhere. So you want to use it again and again, not just in that one example you learned in class.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, reflective, I guess, reflection also comes with, competency-based reflection, learning-based reflection, and yeah, just having the dialogue even with the educators, asking questions, or yeah, being active as well, because I know for future, people who want to graduate and go to their careers, they it's easy, it's easy to look at learning as theoretical, but we do have there is a way to make it practical, and for students to develop their soft skills, hard skills, really get to they're learning to become effective, and help them, when they graduate, they can find, they can be successful in their careers, I guess. So, really important.
Absolutely.
And yeah, as the last piece, I wanted to touch on, I guess, 21st century education, because I guess we talked about it a little bit before, but could you just touch on the essential elements of 21st century education?
Yeah, so, I guess 21st century education also comes on the heels of what we would call 21st century skills. And what we've seen in the 21st century is this is sort of culmination of the information age that started back in the 90s with the internet and so forth, that things that previously were valuable was how much information you could retain and recall. Whereas now you can access it online and Google it anytime you like, or go to Wikipedia and find out more. So what's more important now are other concepts like critical thinking, being able to analyze something and understand what you're looking at. Critical thinking also feeds into what we call digital literacy. So knowing what to believe on a website and what not to believe on a website, credibility. The other thing is creativity, being creative in our work. The other one is collaboration, teamwork, being able to collaborate with each other. In the software world, agile is creating more and more collaborative ability among software developers for sure. And then, like I said, media literacy, information literacy. There's so much information coming at us from people with different motives. And if we can't distinguish what their motives are, we will believe them, whether they tell us an election has been stolen, or whether they tell us, that we should do things their way and not our way. I think being able to critically think through that, look at it and go, well, why is this relevant? What is the context? Why is this important to me? Rather than to just believe it like we would something in a newspaper. I think what it means is that it's learning how rather than learning what, so you can always access the what online, all the information you need is there. But I think with these pieces, we're going to better interact with each other. I think a caution from my point of view that I've seen is that we do also need to teach students the categorical organization of things, because I've come across a lot of students that didn't even know how to go searching for something. Or where to go searching for something. And I thought to myself, well, hang on, you're 22, I'm 55. You're supposed to know this stuff, not me. Right? So I think that is the caution, is that context. We've got to remember that everything happens in a context, and, looking at building these areas of strength. We're also finding more and more employers are saying, I can teach you the technical skills, but I cannot teach you those human soft skills, communication, collaboration, common decency, basic work ethic, and these kind of things. So, that brings in that piece of education as developing citizens, developing self-actualized citizens, not simply developing employable graduates. But remembering that we also want self-actualized citizens who are going to make something of their life and feel that meaning. One challenge, Ali, is that some people see education as a combination of learning competencies and then getting a credential. And some people just see the credential. I want the degree so I can get that ticket to that job, right? And everybody's different. Everyone's entitled to see things the way they want to, and we want the system to serve all of them. So student-centered, that helps everybody, no matter what their motivation. And those that want to make it more transactional and go on to a job and career, great. Those that want to make more meaning out of it and go into the knowledge creation side, that's their choice as well.
Yeah, it's really also about the university culture. I think UVic has a culture where there's a lot of, you have a lot of choice about how you go about, how you learn, and how, you have a lot of choice. You can take classes, you can attend events, there's co-op positions where you can develop your skills further, in a more, I guess, in a career environment. So yeah, hopefully, I think UVic is in a good position right now. I think with the use of online tools we have in the past year, I think we're in a forward direction in terms of, helping students kind of learn, making more classes, more students.
Definitely going in the right direction. There's been huge advancements, which has been the positive outcome from the COVID experience too, I guess, for UVic.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, awesome, John. Thank you so much for taking the time, I guess, talking to me about
No worries. No worries.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Education Zone podcast. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Thank you so much. See you next time.